Good afternoon, everyone, or should I say good evening. I'm very happy to see that so many of you have taken the time out of your beautiful June evening to join us for the committee orientation. It's very important for all our committee members to have a good understanding of the role of their committee, how it fits into Michigan Dental Association governance, and the direction that the association is going. So hopefully you'll all learn something and also enjoy the experience, or at least feel it was worthwhile. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. I'd like to let you know, though, that we will be monitoring the chat. So if you have questions that you would like to ask, please do feel free to put your question into the chat, and I'll be happy to answer them as we go along. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll get started. So we update this slide presentation every year to make sure it has the most accurate information and up to date for U.S. committee members. Here's what we're going to go over this evening. We're going to start talking a little bit about MDA organization and structure, and then we're going to give you an overview of the MDA strategic plan. And that should be helpful for you to see how the work of your committee fits into the MDA's overall strategic plan. Then we're going to talk about legal issues that volunteers may face, as well as the discussion of conflict of interest. A little overview of good governance, and then we'll move on to the committee operating manual highlights. You should all have the opportunity to review the committee operating manual if you have any questions, or you can always ask me, or Michelle Nichols-Cruz knows a lot about how the committees operate, as well as Jennifer. Then we'll talk a little bit about leadership resources available to you as a committee member, and then a little more about the committees specifically. So let's look at organization. You know, the Michigan Dental Association obviously is a membership organization, a professional organization for dentists. And we do have, at the end of last year, a little over 4,400 active licensed members and a 76.2% market share. That means that 76.2% of all the active licensed dentists in the state belong to the MDA. Our overall membership numbers are just below 6,000, and that would include our retired and retired life members. We're a 501c6 professional association, and that's an IRS classification. A professional trade association is a 501c6. A charitable institution like our MDA Foundation is a 501c3, and then there are a number of other nonprofit classifications. We have 58 employees between the MDA, MDA IFG, our foundation, and donated dental services. And I'm sure, as you all know, that full dues for members is $550 this year, plus a $295 mandatory assessment. This screen gives you a kind of an overview of how everything fits together. You can see the housing components in the upper left-hand corner here. Our MDA Board of Trustees. I am the sole employee of the board, and the staff report to me. And you can see that the committees here are all arrayed under the board. So you are all standing committees of the Board of Trustees. We do have several subsidiary organizations, including our foundation, the Insurance and Financial Group, our PAC, and the MDA Health Plan. Talking again about the MDA structure, I'm sure that many of you are members of the MDA House of Delegates, and we do have 110 members that are arrayed into 12 regions and 26 component dental societies. The House of Delegates has purview over advisory resolutions. In other words, they can make policy recommendations. They're also the only organization that can change the MDA bylaws, and they elect the Board of Trustees and the ADA delegation. They have 4 committees: the nominating committee that has 1 member per region, and it is chaired by the past president. New this year, due to a resolution at this year's House, the current president, Dr. Vince Benedina, will be our an ex officio member without the power to vote. So the nominating committee, the bylaws language review committee that reviews any bylaws proposals that come forward to make sure that they are presented appropriately to the House. The reference committee, which of course meets at the House, and the committee on credentials, rules, and order. I'm going to turn up. Yes,
thank you.
I see someone looking for a little more volume. I'm going to pull my phone a little closer to me. Does this work better? Can you hear me a little bit better? What does it sound like to you, Jennifer?
I'd like it a little louder.
Okay, I will do my best to see if I can do that. Thanks for drawing it to my attention. It's very difficult to pay attention if you can't hear. So hopefully that will help. The Michigan Dental Association, the Board of Trustees, is made up of the officers and 9 at-large trustees. I'm also an executive director, an ex officio member. We have 17 standing committees, 5 board committees, and the board is responsible for setting policy, budget, and dues. And as I mentioned previously, they employ me as the CEO. This gives you an overview of what my responsibilities are. I'm going to hold my phone to see if this works a little bit better. I'm a non-voting member of all your committees, and I do make an effort to come to at least one committee meeting every year. I oversee the staff and represent the MDA in all of our dealings. So you can take a look at that and review it. We will send you the slide deck afterwards, but I don't want to belabor the executive director responsibilities. Our related agencies include our for-profit subsidiary, which is the MDA Insurance and Financial Group. It's an independent organization, but the MDA Board of Trustees elects the IFG board members annually. We can change, the MDA can change the IFG bylaws, and the IFG cannot endorse by themselves. They recommend endorsement, and that requires the board approval. The foundation is the MDA's charitable organization, and the MDA board elects the foundation board members and also is responsible for the MDA'S bylaws. I hope that most of you are aware that the MDA also sponsors a health plan. It's an ERISA qualified plan, and that is the only board that is actually elected by plan participants. And then we have our dental PAC political committee. The MDA Board of Trustees elects the members of the PAC Board of Governors. So that kind of gives you an overview of how the MDA family of agencies and committees are work together. If you have any questions, please do put them in the chat. In the meantime, I'm going to move on and talk to you about strategic planning. And I think the one thing I'd like you all to take away as you're looking at the MDA strategic plan is an awareness of how your committee fits into the strategic planning initiative. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. We have our first goal, which is a broad overarching goal, is to define and deliver exceptional member value. And this goal originally started with an objective to evaluate our members, to look for the groups that might not be as big a fan of the MDA as others. We completed some research and found that our lagging market is the new dentist market. That is the people who've been out of dental school less than 10 years. So the action plan we have in mind is to develop and implement a plan to increase the new dentist net promoter score to 40 or higher. In other words, to close that gap between the new dentists and members overall. We also plan to assess current MDA products to enhance, maintain, or eliminate and monitor them on an ongoing basis. So for your committee, for example, if you are in the committee on continuing education, you might be thinking, how can I contribute to increasing the value that new dentists receive from the Michigan Dental Association through continuing education? You might bring that mindset to the work that you do on an ongoing basis. Same for peer review. We may find that there's a desire to increase awareness of the code of ethics among new dentists. And that might be a goal that you would pursue. So there's a lot of opportunities when you think that new dentists make up 20 to 25% of our membership, and they're the largest and fastest growing group of people within the membership. So our second goal is to engage and develop relationships with members, and that goes to the member engagement. In other words, how do our members participate in the activities associated with the Michigan Dental Association? And we're really working hard to enhance engagement through technology, through social media, through things like this webinar, for example, allows the opportunity for more people to get involved with the Michigan Dental Association. And one of the key things we are hoping to do over the next year or two is to develop a system for measuring engagement that could be looked at the individual member level. Same thing for leadership engagement. Our goal is to develop a leadership development program for our component dental societies, and we're in the middle of working on that. We call it the Leadership Roadshow. And as you are doing right now, the second strategy has to do with incorporating leadership opportunities using remote participation. The example we're giving is our mentor program, but you're doing it right now. And a lot of the committees are meeting primarily through Zoom. That really allows for more members to participate because it doesn't require the time to drive to Okemos for meetings. And it also allows people to be more flexible with their time. So that's our second goal. Goal 3 is all about organizational sustainability. With the first objective of enhancing financial outcomes, we want to make sure that all the products and services that we offer to members are home runs and that members know about them. So objective 4 is all about making sure that the products and services that we provide to our members are top-notch and that we improve anything that needs improvement. A related thing is increasing organizational capacity. We want to make sure that we're appropriately resourced so that the things that drive value most for members are the activities that receive the adequate amount of staff resources, financial resources, technology resources, and so on. Goal 4 has to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion at all levels. We used to have a separate diversity and inclusion action plan, and it was separate from the strategic plan. As we made a lot of progress on the plan, we became aware of the fact that it really should be incorporated into the strategic plan and not be a separate plan. So you can see we've added the goal that relates specifically to DEI. And objective 6 has to do with working collaboratively with diverse dental populations, organizations such as the Wolverine Dental Society, the Hispanic Dental Association, the American Association of Women Dentists, for example. And we've identified a number of collaborative activities that we'd like to move forward, and we are moving them forward. So that's an exciting time. We've been working on this for about 1.5 years now. Objective 7 has to do with increasing leadership participation among underrepresented segments. This could be gender, racial, ethnic background, making sure that associates and employed dentists, for example, are participants in our leadership. Wanting to make sure that the volunteer leadership is an accurate reflection of our association membership. So we're currently working to continue to recruit and make sure that our leadership cadre is diverse. Interestingly, the committees are some of the most diverse agencies within organized dentistry. Our House of Delegates and our committees are our most diverse group, and that's not too surprising when you consider that there's a large number of people who participate in organized dentistry through those two kind of volunteer opportunities. So that is our, oh, you know what, we've actually, I apologize for this. There is a fifth goal that has to do with advocacy, and evidently it did not get cut and pasted into this PowerPoint. But I can go ahead and talk about it because I happen to know about it. Very committed to this. Advocacy is a key member benefit and a key concern for our own members. And of course, we have the Committee on Governmental and Insurance Affairs that and our DENPAC that are very focused on advocacy initiatives. So we have one section of the strategic plan that really focuses on increasing our members and components interaction with legislators and stakeholders. So we've got a lot of metrics associated with that. And then the second goal has to do with increasing member awareness and satisfaction with our advocacy initiatives. And I can tell you, for example, that for our members overall, when we asked them how much they felt they knew about our advocacy initiatives on a 1 to 10 scale, the average was 6. So the goal is to see an improvement up to 7. We want to get at least a 70% feeling of awareness among our members about what the MDA is doing on the advocacy front. We also asked about satisfaction, and on a 5-point scale, the average answer was 3.6. So we'd like to see that get up to at least a 4. So that covers our strategic plan. Any questions about the strategic plan? Okay, I don't see anything in the chat, but you can see that as you get into your first committee meetings of the year, that when you're looking at your scope documents, you may see some things in the charges for this year that reflects the strategic plan priorities, so you shouldn't be surprised by that. Let's move on and talk a little bit about the legal issues that volunteer leadership faces, specifically related to your fiduciary responsibilities. Fiduciary comes from a Latin term that means trust, and it's a person who has the power or obligation to act for another. So a fiduciary is someone who stands in a special relationship of trust, confidence, or responsibility. So as a committee member, as a volunteer, as a board member, as a House member, you have fiduciary responsibilities to the Michigan Dental Association. Those responsibilities fall into the 3 areas of duty: duty of care, duty of loyalty, and duty of obedience. The first, duty of care, just basically says that you have a responsibility to be an active participant. In other words, read your materials ahead of time, come to the meetings, and bring your opinions, bring your thoughts, participate actively in the discussion. That's a prime responsibility. You also want to do what's in the best interest of the Michigan Dental Association overall, and you have a duty to act in a fiscally responsible manner. And that just means the level of prudence that a normally prudent person would bring. You don't have to have an MBA in finance in order to act in a fiscally responsible manner. So, we got a couple of little quiz questions here. How does the board treat information provided by committees? And the answer is, I want you to know, is that the board treats your work very, very seriously. They know you're participating actively. They know you're putting on your thinking hats and bringing your best advice to the board. So they treat it very seriously. It is fairly rare that the board does not take the advice of a committee, although it does occasionally happen because often the board has a fuller context than a committee would. And then when I talk about what should you do if you don't understand all the financial details, of course, the answer is A, demonstrate reasonable care and prudence and ask questions, just like you would, if your own financial advisor or if your own budgeting process in your office or at home, if there was a question that you had. Moving on to the duty of loyalty, it actually comes down to conflict of interest and confidentiality. You want to avoid a conflict of interest as much as you can, recognizing that you are all busy people with multiple things on your plate. There's a duty to identify conflicts if they do exist and disclose them. And the idea is that if you think there might be one, disclose. It's always better to over disclose. From the standpoint of confidentiality, what this means is that you don't talk about committee deliberations, you don't share information that you received through your committee service, etc. So a couple of questions that we have here have to do with conflict of interest. Often people identify conflict of interest as a financial conflict of interest. So for example, my wife might be, a committee member might say, well, my wife is a speaker. So I have a conflict of interest because she may be wanting to book the opportunity to be a speaker for the MDA. And that has a money aspect associated with it. But there's also things like representing, you bring your full self to your committee, and if you are a specialist, for example, you want to be recognizing that you may have a conflict of interest if your specialty society has a point of view that you are trying to advance through your committee work, for example. So that's one of the reasons why people may not recognize a possible conflict of interest. If it isn't clearly money, often I find that people don't see that a conflict of interest related to loyalty to more than one organization can be in play. And the second question has to do with discussions in executive session and the special duty of confidentiality there. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on when we're actually talking about executive session. So let's move on to the third one, duty to obedience. It is not the duty to be obedient to your staff who staffs your committee, although that's a funny thing to think, or to your chair. Instead, it's going to be your duty to act in accordance with the governing documents, the MDA mission, vision, core values, your scope, for example. And then the idea is that you will want to support the decision once your committee makes it. So you won't do things like go back to your component and say, well, the committee made this decision, but I didn't vote that way. I didn't agree with that. Here's what I thought you should have done. It's important to support the decisions of your committee. And that means that if a vote is taken and you don't agree with it, you don't immediately ask for it to be reconsidered. But when time goes by, here's the question, for example, when time goes by or you have new information, there is no decision that a committee makes that can't be reconsidered. So, questions about any of the duties? I'm not seeing anything in the chat, so I will move on. Attorney-client privilege is a special executive session. In an executive session, you'll go into executive session if you're going to talk about something you want to keep confidential, right? Very confidential. You might find, for example, the Committee on Governmental Insurance Affairs wants to talk about some political strategy. So they will go into executive session in order to keep that confidential. Well, attorney-client privilege is a special kind of executive session where it's specifically seeking advice from the MDA's attorney. The good thing about attorney-client privilege is that disclosure cannot be compelled. And I'll give you guys an example. There was a lot of conversation at one point about Smile Direct Club. And you may be aware that a couple years ago, Smile Direct Club actually sued the Michigan Dental Association. So That was a topic that was discussed in attorney-client session, and it could easily have been discussed in attorney-client session in a committee as well as at the board level. So the good news is the stuff you discuss in attorney-client session cannot be, you cannot be compelled to disclose it to in a lawsuit, for example. But it's important that you don't break attorney-client privilege by talking about it to someone outside of the group that is supposed to be included. Must be kept in absolute confidence. So the answer to the question below, with whom can you discuss a topic that was addressed in attorney-client session? Only the people who were in the session at the time should be included in any subsequent discussions. Doesn't happen very often. Another area that is of legal interest is antitrust. I think that most volunteers probably have a pretty good understanding of antitrust by now. And antitrust is when two or more independent dentists or entities engage in a joint activity. And the joint activity has to restrain competition. So that means it has to either be illegal on its face, like we all get together and say we're going to do a particular thing, or the rule of reason would tell you that the impact of what you're deciding to do would restrain competition. The thing that's interesting about antitrust, and I just referenced Smile Direct Club, was actually the lawsuit they brought against us was on the basis of antitrust, is that the Justice Department, the Federal Trade Commission, and private parties can seek to enforce it. So, and the one thing that I definitely learned is that you do not have to be guilty of antitrust to be sued for antitrust. Can two dentists in the same practice be guilty of antitrust? They can be if they don't have shared financial risk. So it's one of those things where you do need to be careful about what you decide to do. So let's talk a little bit about conflict of interest. We did a little discussion of that earlier under duty of loyalty. We're going to have you read, review, and sign the MDA policy on conflict of interest. And you can see here the slide talks about the things that you're not supposed to do. You may have a personal or professional conflict. You could use information gained as a committee member for your personal gain or advantage or to the detriment of the MDA. You could use your position as a committee member for personal gain or advantage, or you could use or disclose any non-public, confidential, or proprietary information. This is a policy that we have you review and sign every year because it is an important one. The key questions that you would ask when you're signing is, do I have a conflict, or is there any relationship that I have that could be considered a conflict? You know, what are my personal and professional interests? What is personal gain or advantage, detriment to the ADA, or using or disclosing information? So hopefully these are all pretty clear. My only message on this would be, you know, remember that it's not only just about money. So let's pause here. We are about 40 minutes in to our overview tonight, and I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit next about good governance. Here are the core values for the Michigan Dental Association, and you can see that these are very likely to be standards that you live up to as a volunteer on a daily basis. We talk a little bit about good decision-making with committees, and we've listed here some of the things that get in the way of good decisions, you know, where you don't question, for example, the stuff that you think everybody agrees with you on. What you see is all there is a common thing, so it's important to get everybody's point of view and diverse viewpoints at the table. Confirmation bias goes to the tendency to notice those things that you agree with. Groupthink is when you've got a really enjoyable committee, you want to reach consensus quickly, and you are all thinking the same way. Sometimes you want to appoint a devil's advocate to bring another point of view to the table so that you don't get overwhelmed by just this desire to reach consensus. Time pressure is something that I think is really probably the most common barrier to good decisions that I see, because most committees have a very full agenda and a lot of work that they're wanting to get done. And then, you can see sometimes you get too far into the weeds, or there can be politics or cliques related to personalities. So hopefully you can keep those in mind as you are, especially you guys who are on the call who are committee chairs. It's important for the committee chair and the staff member to work together to make sure there's a full and thorough and thoughtful discussion when you're making decisions. Okay, I'm having a little trouble getting, there we go. I'm going to talk a little bit about some highlights of the committee operating manual. There is a governance hierarchy. Obviously, what you're required to do by law is way more critical than what parliamentary procedure says that you should do. So this is the hierarchy. The law is the top, then bylaws, all our policy manuals, board actions, and parliamentary procedure make up the governance hierarchy. So when you're considering, what governs what I need to do, if there is not a specific policy about it, then it goes to parliamentary procedure. But we're not particularly bureaucratic about that. So we really want the committees to do the work that they need to do to make the positive impact that they need to make. From a relationship standpoint, all committees are advisory to the Board of Trustees, and the scope document that you'll be reviewing with your director and your committee chair lays out your composition, purpose, authority, and your charges for the year. Obviously, the committee can do more than the board charges ask them to, but it's important to really treat seriously the request that the board makes of the committee. You can bring any idea forward to the Board of Trustees that is within your scope for board consideration. We welcome reports and proposals from committees. Some committees may have an official representative that is, designated to talk publicly. So, for example, Dr. Tesla was an official representative to talk about our MDA annual session. We often see the chair of the CGIA or Access as a designated official representative to talk with the media, for example. And of course, your MDA staff that support your committee do have multiple responsibilities. Usually, in addition to supporting your committee, they've got a very full plate of work implementing activities for the benefit of our members. When it comes to committees and board relations, committees very frequently submit reports to the board based on committee action. The board does review all the committee minutes on an ongoing basis as well. So it's not important to submit a report for every meeting, but if you have a proposal or you have a recommendation for the board, then that should be in an official report. Committee chairs or representatives of the committees are more than welcome to attend any and all board meetings. We would love to have you there. And your committee may have a board liaison. Typically, a board liaison is designated at the request of the committee, or if there is a particular board member who has an affinity for a particular committee and would like to serve as a liaison. So just to revisit, when you do make a proposal to the board and you're making a recommendation, the board very frequently does just approve exactly as you've presented it. Sometimes they will revise it. Occasionally, they will refer it back to you and ask for additional information. Or they may say, we would like to discuss this, but we want to hold it over to the next meeting. Occasionally, they will defeat a recommendation and say, thank you very much, but we're not going to do this. So I think the bottom line is that the board is not there to do your work or to redo your work, but they do have a broader perspective than most committees. So let's talk for a second about finances. The Michigan Dental Association budget is done on the calendar year. So budgeting starts in spring and the budget is finalized in the September-October timeframe. And we are just getting ready to, roll up our sleeves and do the 2023 budget. Committee input into the MDA budget is encouraged. And as we said earlier, the board is responsible for all financial management, budget, and dues, and the proposed budget that the committees put forward may be approved or revised. The other thing related to finances, let's say your committee has a brainstorm and they think of something wonderful to do, but the budget is approved. Does that mean that it has to wait for a year? No. If there's something, even if it has a financial implication, if there's something that you want to recommend, you can bring it to the board and the board may approve it and allocate money out of the MDA's non-reserve account to pay for it. If it has a short time frame and a decision needs to be made between board meetings, the executive committee is authorized to approve financial recommendations up to $25,000. So just want you to know that there is an opportunity for your committees to be actively engaged in this year-round. Finally, we're getting towards the end here, guys. Thank you so much for your attention. I hope I haven't lost too many of you to snoozing. Leadership Central. This is the part of our michigandental.org website that has a lot of resources on it for you as volunteers. So you can, if you haven't been there, I would encourage you to go and look. We have a section of it called Leadership Roadshow as well. And right on there, it has quite a bit of online CE that's free to you that you may take just for honing leadership skills. And we're constantly looking for additional resources to put on Leadership Central. So if you have any suggestions or any thoughts, please, anytime, I'd love to hear from you on that. The other thing I want to bring up to you is our 2022 MDA Leadership Forum. This is a free full day of continuing education on leadership topics. It is to be held September 30th of this year, and it will be here in the Lansing area. So it's free registration, over 5 continuing education credits, great speakers, and it's a wonderful, wonderful networking opportunity. So as a committee member, if you'd like to get more involved or you have a friend that you'd like to get more involved, we have three tracks and some great plenary sessions. So I'd like to encourage you, registration is open. I'd like to encourage you to attend. So wrapping up, when we talk about your committee, your staff and your chair are going to talk to you about your committee scope. Basically, committees are generally pretty consistent in composition. You can have consultants on the basis of needed expertise or perspective. The authority is usually advisory, but there are some committees that have delegated responsibilities. So, for example, the Committee on Public Relations chooses the recipients of the component grant program. They also do the daily, monthly oversight of the public education campaign. So the duties are their ongoing responsibilities, and when you review your scope, the charges are what the board has asked your committee to do. As you work with your committee, it may be sometimes where it would be a good idea to break up into smaller groups in order to do specific tasks. So the committee chair has the authority to appoint subcommittees if they are needed. And committee members and approved consultants can serve on subcommittees as the committee chair appoints. You can even go beyond that and add some other people as needed. You just have to alert the MDA president and ask for appointment. And in the years that I've been here, I've never seen them say no. A subcommittee who's working on a particular topic shouldn't go straight to the board. They should take their recommendation to the full committee, and then it goes to the board. And these subcommittees expire at the end of the leadership year, or if they finish their work early before the leadership year is over, they expire when the work is complete. If you have a subcommittee that you need to continue over from one year to the other, you may do so simply by reappointing. So that is it. That is your overview. I hope that I'm going to stop my sharing. I hope that the presentation today has given you some feel for how your committee fits in the broader governance of the Michigan Dental Association. You know, we started doing these committee orientations after we did a volunteer survey where it was apparent that some of our committee members really were very focused only on their committee. They didn't really see or understand how it all fit together. So I think it's these days I'm hopeful that all committee members have a better understanding of governance of the Michigan Dental Association, and committees are actually a great place for our people to move forward to other positions on boards and the MDA board, for example, IFG board, or a foundation board. So we would be happy to facilitate it and see many of you continue on your volunteer journey. So let me look and see what we have in the, Martin Murad is asking, where can I have access to this recording or PowerPoint for future reference? We will email you the PowerPoint, and the archive will be available, and will Jennifer, I believe you will send it out to all the committees so that all the committee members, so they have it. Am I correct about that?
Yes, you'll receive a link as soon as the webinar recording is posted, and you will also get a copy of the slide deck at the same time.
Awesome. Fabulous. Well, thank you so much for being with us. And we very much value and appreciate the work that all you committee members do on behalf of your colleagues and on behalf of the Michigan Dental Association. So thanks again, and have a wonderful evening.